People talk about the moment. They want to hear about the moment in the records bay, with the delegation standing behind me and the terminal open and Preen Velser reading out the formal exile designation like it was a shipping classification. They want the clean version, the one where I stood up and said something worth repeating. The truth is, it didn't start in the records bay. It started 3 years before, on a loading dock in the middle of a night shift, when a gray-skinned alien girl with her collar turned up to her jaw was the only one who knew where I'd misfiled a transit manifest, and she told me without being asked. I've been the Joint Sector Logistics Coordinator at Compact Waystation Keth Sorvath for 9 years. Before that, I did 12 years on the Velorath Primary Corridor. Before that, frontier survey work on 2 moons nobody remembers. I'm not telling you this to establish my credentials. I'm telling you because by the time Vithai Salyun arrived at Keth Sorvath, I had spent 21 years learning that the most important work at any way station is the work nobody sees, and the people most likely to do it correctly are the ones nobody sees either. Keth Sorvath sits at the junction of 3 secondary trade corridors in the outer Velkoran belt. It's not a prestigious posting. The primary corridors pass it by. Most of the traffic through Keth Sorvath is third-tier freight, personnel transfers, the occasional survey team making for the outer belt. The staff rotate in and out every 18 months, except for me and a few long-term section leads who have decided, for their own reasons, that this is where they want to be. I've watched 83 people rotate through in 9 years. Some of them were remarkable. Most of them were ordinary. All of them left. The alien population at Keth Sorvath is mixed. We get Velorath, Velkoran, Velinari, a handful of others passing through the secondary corridors. The Velkoran are a tall, gray-skinned people. The Velkoran Neutral Territory designation means they pass through frequently but rarely stay. Most of the permanent Velkoran residents in the outer corridor are there because they have nowhere better to be. Vithai arrived on a freight transfer from the Velkoran second corridor. She had 1 bag and a compact provisional work authorization that had been filed correctly, but barely. Someone had signed the secondary endorsement with the wrong designation code, which technically made it valid, but marked it for review at the first administrative checkpoint. I noticed this because noticing this kind of thing is my job. I flagged it, corrected the code, refiled it, and put her in the work queue as a general dock auxiliary. She showed up the next morning at 600, which was 40 minutes before her scheduled start time. She found a crate in Bay 3 that had been logged in the wrong corridor block and corrected it without telling anyone. I know because I found the correction in the log afterward and had to trace it back to her authorization code. That was 3 years ago. I want to be clear about what I knew and what I didn't know. I didn't know she was Velkoran exile designated when she arrived. The work authorization didn't say that whoever filed it had used the general provisional category rather than the exile status category. Whether that was deliberate or an oversight, I never found out. I didn't know what Velsoth Kashin meant. I didn't know about the bioluminescent condition. What I knew was that she was good at the work and that nobody thanked her for it. That sounds simple. It isn't simple if you've worked a compact waystation. At a place like Keth Sorvath, the social architecture is well established after a few years. There are people who eat at the main table in the mess, and people who eat at the auxiliary bench near the wall. There are assignments that carry visible status: the primary corridor coordination, the delegation management, the berthing allocation for the better class freight, and there are assignments that don't. The assignments that don't are distributed in patterns that everyone understands but nobody says out loud. Vithai ate at the auxiliary bench. She took the overnight dock assignments, the corridor cleaning rotations, the manifest reconciliation work that nobody wanted because it meant sitting in the records bay for 3 hours cross-referencing shipping codes. She wore long-sleeved duty clothes regardless of temperature. She kept her collar up. She spoke when spoken to. which at Keth Sorvath meant she spoke rarely, because almost nobody spoke to her first. The social enforcement mechanisms at a place like Keth Sorvath are subtle and rarely visible in any individual interaction. Nobody told Vithai she could not sit at the main table in the mess. Nobody assigned her to the bad shifts by official edict. What happened was more distributed than that. A certain quality of paused conversation when she walked into a common area. A slight reconfiguration of spacing when she arrived on the dock. The Velcorin freight staff, particularly, had a way of not registering her presence. Not hostility, exactly, not anything you could point to in a formal complaint, just a sustained and deliberate omission. She was not included in the informal briefing conversations before shift start. She was not invited to the section lead coordination meetings, even the ones that covered work she was directly involved in. She was present at Keth Sorvath the way furniture is present, functional, unremarkable, not something you spoke to. I had seen this pattern before on other postings, with other individuals who existed in some category that the dominant social group had collectively decided to omit. It is a particularly efficient form of erasure because it requires no coordination and leaves no record. Everyone simply continues doing what they were already doing, and the person being erased has no target, no complaint mechanism, nothing to push against. They are not excluded. They are just not included. There is a difference, and the difference is exactly large enough to be invisible in any formal review, while being entirely visible to anyone living inside it every day. I noticed her because she did the work correctly. That's all. I'm not going to tell you it was something more than that because it wasn't, not at the start. I noticed her the same way I notice any anomaly in the log, because something was done right that I hadn't explicitly assigned, and I needed to understand why. Over the first 3 months, I started leaving specific tasks in her queue. Not the worst ones. I wasn't doing her a favor by loading her down. The ones that needed precision. The detailed manifest reconciliations, the incoming freight cross-checks, the compliance audits on the secondary corridor transfers. The work that required sustained attention and a tolerance for bureaucratic detail. She was better at it than anyone else on the dock. I started using her name in the assignment logs. This sounds like nothing. At Keth Sorvath, the dock auxiliary staff were typically logged by their authorization codes. Easier for the system, nobody had argued otherwise. I changed the log format to use given names, not just for her, for everyone in the auxiliary rotation. But she was the reason I did it. She noticed. I know because 3 weeks after I changed the format, she came to my office window, not the door, the window. She didn't come to doors if she could avoid it, and said, in standard, that she had found an error in the Corridor 7 transfer manifest that dated back 6 weeks and could she correct it. I told her yes. She said quietly that it was a significant error, that it had been creating a recurring discrepancy in the Corridor 7 reconciliation. She explained the mechanism carefully, the freight header mismatch, the cascade effect through the secondary routing codes, the way the error had been compounding silently through 4 weeks of unrectified manifest data. It was a precise explanation. She had clearly thought it through before coming to the window. I asked why she hadn't corrected it 6 weeks ago. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said she hadn't been sure it was her place. I said it was her place. That if something was wrong, the person who saw it was the person whose place it was. She nodded, not like she believed me, like she was storing the information for later review. That was the longest conversation we had for the first 8 months. I learned about the condition gradually, not from her, from the ambient information of a waystation, the way other staff talked or didn't talk or stepped back slightly when she moved through the corridor, the particular quality of the space that opened around her in the mess. I learned the word Velsothkashin from a Velcorin freight coordinator named Preen Volith, who had a habit of narrating his opinions to whoever was nearest. Velsothkashin, the marked one, The Velcorin word for someone whose bioluminescent veins had brightened beyond the invisible range, whose veins were visible to the naked eye along the neck and forearms, a faint blue-white that appeared under stress or temperature change or strong emotion. In Velcorin traditional cosmology, this was a sign of corruption. The marked one carried something wrong in their blood, something that could not be repaired, something that, according to tradition, would spread misfortune to those around them. The biology of it is not complicated. I looked it up. Bioluminescent vein visibility in Velcorin physiology is a recessive trait expression, harmless, involuntary, occurring in roughly 1 in 800 individuals. The Velcorin had been classifying it as a mark of corruption for, by the records I found, approximately 900 years. No compact medical authority had ever validated that classification. No empirical study in any accessible database supported it. The Velcorin themselves had no scientific basis for it. They had tradition. Tradition was enough. Vithai had been cast out from her family unit 3 years before she arrived at Keth Sorvath. Not formally exiled, not yet, not when she arrived, but informally removed. Removed from the family record, removed from the community designation. The people she had grown up with, the unit she had been part of, had simply declined to continue acknowledging her. She had moved to the second corridor, then to the outer waystation, then, with a provisional work authorization that barely cleared administrative review, to Keth Sorvath. She had been living on the dock rotation for 2 years without a complaint filed, without a performance issue, without missing a single shift, before I understood even half of this. I want to be careful here. I didn't decide to help Vithai. I didn't choose her as a project. What happened was more gradual and more ordinary than that. I ran a waystation. She was on my staff. She did the work better than almost anyone else, and she was treated as though she wasn't there. Those things were all true simultaneously, and over time they added up to a pattern I couldn't ignore without ignoring something about how I ran the station. So I assigned her the Corridor 7 primary coordination, not as a favor, because she was the best person I had for it. The response from the dock rotation was immediate and specific. 2 of the Velcorin freight staff filed a preference complaint with station admin within 48 hours. The complaint language was careful. They cited concerns about workflow integration, about the communication requirements of the primary coordinator role, about undefined professional compatibility standards. Nobody used the word Velsoth-Cashin in a formal document. Nobody needed to. The complaint was clear enough to anyone who read it with any knowledge of the social dynamics at Keth Sorvath. I read the complaint. I read the relevant compact administrative protocols. I read the Joint Sector Coordination Framework, specifically the section covering assignment authority and the conditions under which preference complaints could result in assignment changes. The answer, under the relevant protocol, was assignment changes based on preference complaints were only mandated when the complaint contained a documented performance objection from the assigned individual's direct supervisor. I was the direct supervisor. I denied the complaint on the grounds that it contained no professionally substantiated performance objection and reassigned the Velcorin freight staff to the secondary dock rotation. Vithai found out about the complaint 2 days later. I don't know who told her. She came to my office door, not the window, and asked, in the flat, careful voice she used when she was managing something, if I was aware that the reassignment had created a scheduling difficulty. I said I was. She said, with the same flatness, that she didn't require the primary coordinator role. I said that I required someone in the primary coordinator role who did the work correctly, and she was that person. She looked at me for a moment. Her eyes, pale silver, the color of light through thin cloud cover, had a quality I had started to notice over the preceding months. They registered everything. Whatever she was feeling, whatever she was processing, it all happened behind those eyes without announcement. Most people at Keth Sorvath communicated in obvious ways. Vithai communicated in the precise degree of stillness with which she received information. She said, "All right." She took the primary coordinator role. She did not make an error in the first 60 days. She made one small error in the 61st day, caught it herself before the shift ended, corrected it, and filed a self-review note that was more thorough than most of my staff's quarterly performance reports. Somewhere in the months after that, I stopped thinking of her as an anomaly in the log and started thinking of her the way you think of a person you know well, not comprehensively, not without gaps, but with a specific understanding of how they work. I knew she was better with written assignments than verbal ones. I knew she ate lunch early and alone and left the mess before the second shift crowd arrived. I knew she kept the Corridor 7 manifest in better order than any previous coordinator, and that she had quietly updated the cross-reference system for the secondary freight categories in a way that saved approximately 90 minutes of reconciliation work per week, and that she had told nobody about this. I told people about it. I put it in the station log. I cited her authorization code and her name. I don't think she had expected that. I think she had been operating for 3 years on the assumption that good work was its own adequate return, that you did it because it was right, not because it would be recognized, because recognition was not a thing that was going to come. I don't know what to do with the fact that I was probably the first person in 3 years who had routinely written her name down in a positive context. That feels like it should be a larger thing than it was. At the time, to me, it was just accurate record keeping. Her name was in the log because she was the person who did the work. The Velcorin delegation arrived on a morning in the 3rd year of her assignment to Keth Sorvath. 3 people. Preen Velser, who led it, a documentation officer named Vethar Solon, and a younger delegate whose name I never caught. They had traveled from the Velcorin Primary Administration Hub on a formal transit designation, which meant their visit was scheduled and official, and had cleared 3 levels of compact administrative review. I had not been informed of the purpose of the visit. This was irregular. Formal delegations to a joint sector waystation are supposed to file a purpose statement with the station coordinator at least 72 hours in advance. No purpose statement had been filed. I had noted the omission when the transit designation came through and had made a record of it, because in 9 years of running Keth Sorvath, I had learned that administrative omissions are rarely accidental when they involve formal delegations. I was reading the manifest board when they came through the dock doors, and I knew, from the quality of their entrance, from the deliberate spacing of their arrival, from the fact that Preen Velser was carrying a sealed document case that he held slightly away from his body, the way people carry things they intend to formally present, that this was not a routine freight inspection. I also noticed in the same moment that Vithai was on the dock. She was running the morning freight check on the Corridor 3 berths, which was on the far side of the dock floor from the main entrance. She had her back to the delegation. She didn't see them come in. Preen Velser was a tall man, even by Velcorin standards. Deep gray skin, formal silver braid at the collar, the practiced authority of someone who had delivered formal documents many times and expected the deliveries to proceed without friction. He looked around the dock, assessed it, and walked directly toward the coordination station where I was standing. He introduced himself in standard, which was polite. He said he was here in his capacity as a representative of the Velcorin Continuity Administration. He said his delegation had traveled to Keth Sorvath to complete a formal administrative process that required the coordination and countersignature of the resident compact sector coordinator. I asked what process. He opened the document case. The papers were formal exile designation documents. I recognized the format. I had seen them twice before in my career, in different contexts. The Velcorin exile designation is a specific legal instrument. It terminates all Velcorin civic standing for the named individual, removes them from the population registry, and formally requests that any compact or allied administrative body update their records to reflect the individual's stateless designation. It is not a frequently used instrument. It requires multiple levels of administrative authorization within the Velcorin civic structure, and once filed, has a specific set of consequences that are difficult to reverse. The name on the documents was Vithai Salyun. I read the documents carefully, all of them. Preen Velser stood across the station counter from me with his hands folded and waited. His documentation officer had his terminal out and his stylus ready. The younger delegate had positioned himself at a slight angle from the counter, as if he had been told to watch the broader dock floor. I was aware of all three of them while I read, and I was aware, with the peripheral attention of someone who has run a busy loading dock for 9 years, that Vithai was still at the corridor 3 berths. Her back was still to the delegation. She was running the freight check and had not yet looked up. The documents were in order. I could not find a procedural error in them. The authorization codes were correct. The administrative levels had been properly sequenced. The language of the exile designation was standard Velcorin civic instrument language, formal and precise, and entirely clear about what it was asking the compact to do. Record Vithai Salyun as stateless, with no Velcorin civic standing, for the stated reason of Velsoth Kashin. I looked at that stated reason for a long time. Then I asked Preen Velser what he needed from me. He said he needed the compact sector coordinator to acknowledge the exile designation and update the Keth Sorvath personnel registry to reflect the subject's stateless status. He said this would have the effect of reclassifying her work authorization from provisional person to provisional stateless, which would require a new administrative review of her continued presence at the station. He said this in the tone of a man explaining a simple process to someone who might not be familiar with it. I asked if the subject was aware the delegation was here. He said it was not required that the subject be informed in advance. I asked if the subject was currently on Keth Sorvath. He said he had verified that she was, prior to filing the travel designation. I asked if the subject had committed any compact violation that would require this processing to be prioritized. He said the matter was a Velcorin civic administration issue, not a compact violation proceeding. I said I understood that. I was asking about compact violations specifically because the compact administrative protocol for processing allied body status changes on current compact personnel requires, in the absence of any active compact violation, a 90-day administrative review period during which the subject retains their current status. I asked if he had the compact administrative protocol for allied body status changes. He said he did not have that specific document with him. I said I had it. I went to the records bay. I was gone for approximately 4 minutes. I was not confused about what I was doing. I knew exactly what I was doing. When I came back, I had 3 things. The compact administrative protocol document, which I placed on the counter, the compact joint sector personnel registry terminal, which I had unlocked on my side, and the complete Velcorin exile designation form, which I had read in full and was now reading again with the protocol document open beside it. Preen Velser had, in my absence, moved slightly closer to the dock floor, which meant he had moved slightly closer to Vithai. His documentation officer had stopped preparing to type. The younger delegate was no longer watching the dock with general interest but with a specific quality of attention that I did not like. I noted all of this. I said nothing about it. I turned to the protocol document. Preen Velser began to explain, for my benefit, the Velcorin civic process that had led to this designation, the family unit decision, the community council review, the continuity administration's formal authorization. He spoke carefully and at appropriate length, in the measured tone of a man who considered this a straightforward matter of civic record-keeping. He used the word Velsothkashin approximately 4 times in the first 2 minutes. He was not unkind about it, which was almost worse. He was administrative. He described her condition the way you describe a specification error in a component part, a thing that was the wrong configuration for the environment it was meant to serve, and that no amount of performance or goodwill could correct. I let him finish. Then I asked, with the compact administrative protocol document open on the counter between us, if he had reviewed Compact Protocol 7, Section 14, Subsection C. He said he was not familiar with that specific subsection. I explained it. Compact Protocol 7, Section 14, Subsection C states that any allied body administrative status change affecting a current compact personnel registrant requires the compact sector coordinator to assess whether the status change creates any conflict with compact operational continuity requirements before the change can be processed. Specifically, if the subject of the status change holds any compact assignment classification of grade 3 or above, and if the subject's removal from active status would create a documented operational impact, the compact coordinator may designate a continuity hold of up to 12 months during which the status change is deferred pending review. Vithai Salyun held a grade 4 corridor coordination assignment. The Corridor 7 primary coordination was, as I had documented over the preceding 18 months, a position whose occupant had improved station efficiency by a measurable degree. I had the documentation in the station log. I had the cross-reference system update. I had the quarterly performance reports, all of which I had written myself, in which I had noted specifically and by name the quality and volume of her work. I had, as it happened, printed copies of the relevant sections in the records bay while I was retrieving the protocol document, because I had understood, when the transit designation came through 3 days ago without a purpose statement, that this possibility existed, and I preferred to have documentation present rather than to have to retrieve it during a conversation. I placed the printed copies on the counter beside the protocol document. Preen Velser looked at the documents for a long moment. Then he said that this was not the purpose of the compact personnel registry, and that using an operational continuity provision to defer an allied body civic process was, in his view, an administrative misapplication. I said he was entitled to that view. I said the relevant compact administrative body was the Joint Sector Administrative Review Board, and that if he wanted to challenge the continuity designation, he was welcome to file a formal objection with that body. I said that, in the meantime, I was not going to process the stateless designation. He was quiet again. His documentation officer had stopped preparing to type and was watching me instead. Then Preen Velser said, in a voice that had lost some of its administrative evenness, that the Velkoran Continuity Administration did not recognize the compact's authority to defer a Velkoran internal civic process. I said I understood that position. I said that the compact, however, recognized the compact's authority over its own personnel registry. I said that the compact personnel registry was a compact document, not a Velkoran document, and that what went in it was a compact determination. Then he said the thing that I had been waiting for him to say, because it was the thing I had known he would eventually say, because it was the only place the conversation could go from where it was. He said that the subject's Velsothkashin designation made her presence at a compact waystation a concern for the well-being of the station's other personnel, and that by allowing her to remain in a coordination role, I was creating a situation that responsible compact administration should address. I looked at him. I let the quiet sit there for a moment. Then I turned to the terminal. I want to be precise about what I did, because people have told the story different ways, and some of the versions don't match what actually happened. I did not make a speech. I did not say anything for approximately 90 seconds. I opened the compact Joint Sector Personnel Registry. I navigated to the Keth Sorvath Active Personnel section. I found Vithai Salyun's entry, which had been filed under her Provisional Authorization Code in the abbreviated format used for auxiliary staff. I opened the entry. I changed the entry format from Provisional Auxiliary to Full Registered Personnel of Record. This is a different category in the compact registry. It carries different administrative standing, different protections, different continuity provisions. It requires the sector coordinator's direct authorization. I had the authorization. I had held it for 9 years and had, to my knowledge, never used it for a full registered personnel designation for an auxiliary staff member. Then I typed her full name. Not her authorization code, not the abbreviated provisional format. Her full name, Vithai Salyun Velkorin. Velkorin. The family designation, the community designation, the designation that her exile papers said she no longer held and that the compact had no requirement to recognize. I put it in the name field anyway because it was her name. It was the name she had been born with. The fact that her people had decided to stop using it did not change that it was her name. Names are facts. They don't stop being true because the people who gave them decide to look away. I typed it carefully, I checked the spelling, I confirmed the entry. Then I turned back to Preen Velser and his documentation officer and the younger delegate, who had gone very still at the far end of the counter. I said, the subject's compact registry entry now reflects her full registered personnel status. As a full registered compact personnel of record, the standard allied body administrative deferment provisions apply, which means any status change request from an allied body requires a minimum 6-month administrative review. I said he was welcome to file the exile designation with the Joint Sector Administrative Review Board at any time. I said I would note in the station log that the Velkorin delegation had visited Keth Sorvath for the purpose of processing this administrative matter, and that the matter had been referred to the review board pending the continuity assessment. Preen Velser stood with his hands at his sides and the sealed document case under his arm and the exile papers on the counter between us. His face did not change exactly, but the quality of it changed, the administrative evenness becoming something more careful, more assessing. He looked at the terminal screen. He looked at the protocol document. He looked at the stack of performance records I had placed on the counter, each one with her name written out correctly in the section lead field. He said, "You understand that this does not change her civic designation with the Velkorin." I said I understood that. He said, "She is still Velsoth Kashin." I said I understood that too. I said the compact registry did not have a field for Velsoth Kashin. It had a field for name and a field for status and a field for designation. I had filled all 3 correctly. He gathered the documents. He said, with the measured composure of a man who was not finished with this conversation, that he would be contacting the Joint Sector Administrative Review Board. I said that was his right. He and his associates left through the dock doors. The documentation officer had his terminal folded under one arm and had said nothing the entire time. The younger delegate had not said anything either. They walked across the dock floor and through the doors without looking at Vithai, who was still at the corridor 3 berths, and without looking back. The dock was quiet. I became aware, with the specific quality of awareness you develop when you have run a waystation for 9 years, that the dock had been quiet for some time, that the freight check work had stopped, that the other dock staff had drifted to positions where they could see the coordination station, that there were approximately 7 people who had witnessed everything I had said, and most of what Preen Velser had said, and that none of them were currently pretending to do anything. Vithai was standing at the edge of the corridor 3 berths. She had not moved from that position since she had gone still, approximately 40 minutes earlier by my calculation. She was 40 meters away from the coordination station. She was watching me. The pale silver eyes and the gray-violet skin and the long sleeves pulled down to her wrists and the collar that she wore up regardless of temperature. She was very still. I had no way to know what was happening behind the stillness. With most people, you can make a reasonable inference. With Vitha, I had learned over 3 years that the inferences were not always right, and that the best approach was patience. I said her name. Not loudly. The dock was quiet enough that I didn't need to speak loudly. I said, Vitha. She crossed the dock floor. She walked the way she always walked, not quickly, not slowly, the particular pace of someone who has learned to take up exactly the space they need and no more. She stopped at the counter. Her hands were at her sides. I turned the terminal screen toward her. I watched her read it. I watched her find her own name. I watched the stillness in her face do something I had not seen it do before, not break, exactly, not dissolve into something less controlled, but shift. The way light shifts when something in the air changes. Vithai Salyun Velkorin, in black text in the name field of the Compact Joint Sector Personnel Registry. Full registered personnel of record. Full standing. She read it for a long time. I said, it means the exile designation can't be processed without a 6-month review. By the time the review is done, if you decide you want to go somewhere else or do something else, you'll have the compact full personnel registration as a credential. It opens some doors that the provisional authorization doesn't. She said nothing. I said I should have done this a year ago, the work classification. I should have changed it when you took the coordinator role. I didn't because I didn't think about it, and that was an error. She was quiet for another moment. I waited. I was good at waiting by that point. 3 years of working with Vithai Salyun had made me considerably better at waiting. Then she said very quietly, you typed Velkorin. I said I had. She said, they removed that from my designation 2 years before I came here. I said I knew. She said it doesn't mean anything legally. They can still. I said I knew. I said it was her name. I said that was the only reason I had typed it, because it was accurate. She was looking at the screen. The light in the records bay, the flat functional overhead light, caught the line of her jaw and the side of her neck, and I saw what I had not seen clearly before, the faint blue-white trace of the bioluminescent veins, visible along the curve of her neck above the collar, more visible now than I had ever seen it. She was not managing it. She was not, in this moment, performing the careful containment she maintained through every shift at Keth Sorvath. Whatever the condition expressed in response to, it was expressing now. It was, I thought, one of the most ordinary and entirely remarkable things I had ever seen. Not remarkable because it was unusual, remarkable because it was simply hers. Because it was a part of how she was built, as unalterable as the pale silver eyes and the gray-violet skin and the 3 years of careful, precise, unrewarded work. It was a fact about her, the same as all the other facts, and it was not something that needed to be fixed or hidden or apologized for. She looked up from the screen. She said my name, not my title, not my designation, my name, Tam. She said it the way the Velkorin speak a name when they intend it as an acknowledgement. There is a weight to it, a specific quality of emphasis that is different from how standard speakers say a name. I know because I had spent 3 years on the Velorath primary corridor before Keth Sorvath, and I had learned, over those years, enough of the surrounding languages to understand the difference between a name used as an address and a name used as a recognition. It was the Velkorin naming acknowledgement, not the formal registry version, the personal one, the one that means, I have heard your name and I am choosing to carry it, the one that means, you are a person I recognize. She said, thank you. I said, you're welcome. She said, I don't know what the review board will do. I said, neither do I, but the station log is complete. The performance records are complete. The operational continuity case is documented. If it goes to review, the documentation will speak. She nodded. The shift in her face had steadied into something that was not quite her usual professional stillness, and was not quite the unguarded expression of the moment before. It was something I didn't have a precise name for, something that was making a careful decision about whether to exist. She said, "They said when I left the people I had been with that there was nothing in me worth carrying." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said they were wrong. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked back at the screen, at her own name in the name field. She said, "I know." And she went back to work. The review board process took 4 months. The Velcorin delegation filed their objection within 10 days of the visit. I submitted the documentation package, the performance records, the cross-reference system improvement, the operational continuity assessment, the Corridor 7 efficiency metrics, to the Joint Sector Administrative Review Board at the same time, without waiting to be asked. I wrote the continuity assessment myself in language that was, by design, precise and unambiguous, and left no room for a finding that would require creative interpretation. I have been writing administrative documents for 21 years. I know how to write one that means what it says. The review board found in favor of the continuity designation. This was not a dramatic result. The documentation was clean. The case was straightforward. The board noted, in its finding, that the Compact Personnel Registry operated according to Compact administrative standards, and that the Allied Body status change request could be resubmitted following the completion of the 6-month continuity review period. By the time the 6-month period ended, VTHI had been promoted to Sector Coordination Lead, not by me, by the regional administration, on the basis of the Corridor 7 metrics, which the regional admin had noticed in the quarterly efficiency summary. The promotion carried a Grade 6 designation and a set of compact credentials that, by Compact Protocol 7, Section 14, Subsection A, made her effectively unprocessable under Allied Body status change requests without a full Compact board review. It would take the Velcorin Continuity Administration approximately 18 months and 4 levels of formal escalation to even reach the starting point of processing the exile designation against those credentials. Preen Velser's delegation did not refile. I don't know whether that was a legal calculation or something else. I didn't ask. What I know is this. About 2 months after the review board decision on a morning shift, I was at the coordination station reviewing the Corridor 7 manifest, which VTHI had already reviewed and annotated before I arrived, as she always did, and she came to stand next to me at the counter. Not across the counter. Next to me at the station side, looking at the manifest. She said, "The discrepancy in the secondary freight header from last week. I've been running the pattern back. It starts in the routing data from Velcorin's second corridor. Someone is entering the freight designations incorrectly at source, and it's cascading through the manifest every time we have a Velcorin second corridor transfer." I said, "Can you fix it from here?" She said, "I can patch it at the reconciliation stage. To fix it at source, someone would need to contact the Velcorin second corridor administration and flag the data entry error." I said, "Do you want to handle that contact?" She was quiet for a moment. I said, "You know the routing data better than anyone. You'd be the right person to explain the error." She said, "I will handle the contact." I said, "Good." She didn't move immediately. She was looking at the manifest. The overhead light caught the side of her neck again, the blue-white trace of the veins, visible now without the collar pulled all the way up. She had started over the preceding weeks to wear the collar a fraction lower. I had not said anything about this. It was not my place to say anything about it. What she chose to carry and what she chose to show were her decisions, and they always would be. She said, without looking up from the manifest, "I have been offered a posting on the Velinari primary corridor, Grade 7. They want someone with my credentials in the Joint Sector Freight Coordination." I said, "That's a significant posting." She said, "Yes." I said, "Are you going to take it?" She was quiet for another moment. The kind of quiet that meant she was being precise about something. She said, "I haven't decided. Keth Sorvath is, I know this station. I know what the work requires here." I said, "You've known that for about 18 months. The Velinari primary corridor would give you a different set of problems." She said, "You would need a new Corridor 7 coordinator." I said I would find one. The station would be fine. She said, "I know it would be fine. I'm not." She stopped. I waited. She said, "3 years ago I had a provisional work authorization with a bad secondary endorsement code. You corrected it." I said I remembered. She said, "You didn't have to do that." I said the code was wrong. Correcting wrong things is the job. She said, "You know what I mean." I didn't know what she meant. I said, "Yes." She said, "Everything you did, the assignment logs, the primary coordinator role, the continuity designation, the entry in the registry. You didn't have to do any of it." I said I did the things that were accurate. You did the work. The logs should say who did the work. The registry should have your name in it. Those are accurate things. She said no one had done accurate things for a long time. I said I know. She was quiet. The dock around us was doing its morning work. The freight checks, the corridor assignments, the manifest review. And it was doing that work more efficiently than it had 3 years ago. And the person most responsible for that efficiency was standing next to me at the coordination station with her collar slightly lower than it used to be. She said, "I'm going to take the posting." I said, "Good. The Velinari primary corridor is lucky to have you." She said, "I'll file the transition documentation." I said, "Whenever you're ready." She reached past me and made an annotation in the Corridor 7 manifest. Her handwriting in the log system was, as always, precise and clear. Then she stepped back from the station. She said, "Tam." I said, "Yes." She said, "You will be in my record, the full registry form. I'm going to enter it when I arrive at the new posting. Your name in the correct field with the correct designation, so that it is accurate." I understood what she was saying. In Velcorin custom, the personal registry record is not only a civic document, it is also a private one. When a Velcorin person enters another person's name in their own record with the acknowledgement designation, it means, "This person is real to me. This person exists in my account of the world. This person will be carried." I said, "Thank you." She said, "It is accurate." She went back to work. The transfer documentation was filed 11 days later. She spent the remaining 30 days of her rotation at Keth Sorvath running the Corridor 7 coordination with the same precision she had always run it, and spending the last hour of every shift training her replacement, a younger Velinari coordinator named Sorvath Vel, who was competent but nervous, and who Vithai corrected with a patience and specificity I recognized from my own early years as a section lead. She did not praise him when he got things right. She told him what he had done correctly and why it mattered. There is a difference. On her last morning, she came to the coordination station and placed a folded sheet of printed documentation on the counter. It was the compact personnel registry entry, her own entry, with her name in the name field, printed to physical format and folded twice. She said, "For your station log." I said, "The digital record is already in the log." She said, "This one is for your station log." I understood the distinction. I took it. I put it in the folder behind the coordination station counter where I keep the documents I want to be able to find by hand. Then she said my name one more time in the Velcorin naming form, Tam, with the weight of a name being carried. I said, "Safe travels." She nodded. She picked up her bag, one bag, the same one she had arrived with 3 years earlier, though it was fuller now, and walked through the dock doors. The station has a different Corridor 7 coordinator now. Sorveth Vel has found his footing over the past 2 months. He is careful and thorough, and he asks better questions now than he did at the start of his rotation. He is not Vithai. He is good, and he will be good, and the Corridor 7 manifest reflects that. The metrics are good, though not as good as they were. I'm working on the discrepancy in the secondary freight headers, which Vithai's patch handles adequately at the reconciliation stage, but which I'd like to fix at the source. The contact with the Velcorin Second Corridor administration is ongoing. It turns out the data entry error has been running for approximately 4 years, and nobody had caught it until she ran the pattern back. I have in the folder behind the coordination station counter a printed sheet of compact registry documentation with her name on it. I have in the station log 41 months of entries in which her name appears in connection with the work she did. I have in the compact joint sector personnel registry an entry that says, Vithai Salyun Velcorin, full registered personnel of record, full standing. I don't know what the Velcorin records say. I don't know if the exile designation was ever formally refiled or abandoned. I don't know what her people carry in their account of the world. I know what the compact registry carries. And I know what she said when she read her own name in the name field for the first time, with the bioluminescent veins visible along her neck in the flat overhead light, and the pale silver eyes doing something I had never seen them do before, and 3 years of careful, unrewarded work accumulated behind her. She said, "Thank you." And I said, "You're welcome." That's the whole story, not the version with the speech, just the version with the paperwork done correctly and the name in the right field and the person walking out the dock doors toward something better than what they had. The rest of it is just the record. The record is complete.